I'm eating a lot of protein and vegetables and walking. That's what I'm doing. We're approaching the 200-pound mark.
Once a man known for his pain, struggles, and broken roads, Jelly Roll now walks with a strength that echoes louder than any past mistake. His face tells a story, his voice carries the weight of battles won, and his journey inspires millions who once believed they could never rise again. The world has seen transformations before, but few as raw, real, and soul-shaking as his. Jelly Roll's transformation is not just a change in how he looks. It is the story of a man who walked through fire, fell again and again, and still stood back up stronger than before. It's a reminder that redemption isn't built overnight. It's carved out of pain, second chances, and a stubborn refusal to give up. Today, when he steps on stage, the crowd doesn't just hear his songs, they feel his story. They see someone who came from a life where hope was a whisper, not a roar. But it wasn't always this way. Behind every cheer, every award, and every headline, there's a story filled with broken homes, long nights, and a past most people would want to run away from. He didn't run. He faced it. Piece by piece, he built something new out of everything that tried to break him. This is the journey of Jelly Roll. From a boy who grew up in the rough corners of Nashville, to a man who carried the weight of his mistakes, and finally, to the artist who became a voice of redemption for thousands. This is not a fairy tale. It's not polished or sugar-coated. It's real, painfully real. And that's why it matters. So let's go back to where it all began. Let's walk through the streets where Jason Bradley DeFord first learned what pain, love, and survival meant. Jelly Roll was born as Jason Bradley DeFord on December 4th, 1984, in Nashville, Tennessee. He grew up in Antioch, a working-class neighborhood on the southeast side of the city. Life there wasn't easy. The streets taught lessons faster than schools did, and if you weren't strong, you got swallowed up. But in that hard place, a boy was learning how to survive and how to dream, even when dreams felt far away. His father, Horace Buddy DeFord, worked in the meat business, running a small wholesale shop that paid the bills. But there was more to Buddy than just hard work. He also ran a side hustle as a bookie, taking bets to make extra money. Jelly Roll saw early what it meant to hustle to keep a family afloat. His father wasn't perfect, but he was present. And that mattered. Jelly Roll had 3 older half-siblings, 2 brothers, Roger and Scott, and a sister, Shelby. They were part of his world, shaping his early years. His mother, whose name he kept private, had her own wars to fight. She struggled with substance addiction and mental health issues that often spilled into their home. Some nights were filled with music and laughter. Others were filled with silence and pain. It was his mother who gave him the nickname Jelly Roll. As a chubby kid, she lovingly called him that, never knowing that the name would one day be known across the world. Years later, when music became his identity, he would prefer to be called simply Jelly. It was personal. It reminded him where it all began. Despite her struggles, his mother had one gift that changed everything: music. She would sit with him and play artists like George Strait and Garth Brooks, while others might have seen it as simple background noise. For Jelly, it was a doorway to a world he didn't yet understand. Through her, he learned that music wasn't just entertainment. It was storytelling. It was a way to speak when words failed. At just 9 or 10 years old, he wrote his first rap song. He didn't know if it was good or bad. He just knew it felt like a way out. By 8th grade, he was making mixtapes on cheap blank CDs and handing them out in high school parking lots. He wasn't waiting for someone to discover him. He was pushing his sound out himself, the only way he knew how. Then, life shifted. His parents divorced when he was just 13. The separation hit him hard. Suddenly, the house felt emptier. His father wasn't there anymore, and in his young heart, Jelly felt like he had to step up for his mom. He wasn't a man yet, but he tried to act like one. And in a place like Antioch, stepping up often meant stepping into dangerous territory. To bring in money, he started selling illegal substances. But even then, music never left his side. He would slide his mixtapes into the bags of people he sold to, pushing his art into corners most would never think of. He wasn't proud of that life, but he was surviving. Through it all, his bond with his father never broke. Buddy taught him lessons that stuck forever. He showed Jelly what it meant to stand against racism and how to carry himself with dignity, no matter where he came from. These weren't lessons written in books. They were lived through every hard moment. When Buddy died from cancer in March 2019, Jelly felt the ground beneath him shake. But the values his father left behind became part of his backbone. Jelly Roll's early life wasn't painted in gold. It was painted in grit, in mistakes, in small moments of hope that kept him moving forward. From his mother's addiction to his father's lessons, from his first rap at 10 to hustling mixtapes in parking lots, every piece of that story built the foundation for the man the world knows today. But just as the foundation was being laid, the storm was about to hit harder. Jelly Roll's teenage years were not easy chapters in his story. They were filled with chaos, poor choices, and a justice system that became far too familiar far too soon. At the age of just 14, he was arrested for the first time. It was the beginning of a long and painful dance with the law. As he grew older, the arrests kept coming. Over the years, Jelly Roll would be arrested around 40 times for different offenses. Some were small, some were serious, but all of them left marks. Not just on his record, but on his soul. He was living in a cycle that felt endless. One of the most serious moments came when he was only 16 years old. That year, he was charged with aggravated robbery. Though he was still just a boy, the court charged him as an adult. It was a decision that changed the course of his life. Facing the possibility of 20 years behind bars, he learned quickly how cruel and cold the world could be. He ultimately served just over a year in jail and spent more than 7 years on probation. But even when he was out, he wasn't really free. The charge stayed on his record permanently. It stripped him of basic rights. He couldn't vote, couldn't volunteer in many places, and couldn't legally own a firearm. The shadow of his mistakes followed him everywhere. Outside the courtroom, his life wasn't any easier. He was selling illegal substances, and eventually he started using them too. It became a way to escape, but it was also a trap that pulled him deeper. His nights blurred into one another, and the dreams of becoming a musician started to fade behind the smoke and the sirens. But pain has a strange way of teaching lessons. As the years went by, Jelly Roll began to understand the pain of addiction, not just his own, but of others around him. He started visiting rehabilitation centers, not as an addict looking for help, but as a man trying to speak to others who were where he once stood. He started to believe, even in his darkest moments, that redemption might still be possible. Then came another arrest. He was 23 years old. It wasn't new territory, but something about this time was different. It was a moment that would split his life into a before and an after. On May 22, 2008, Jelly Roll sat inside a prison cell. It was just another day in a long string of bad choices and hard nights. But then, a correctional officer approached him with news that would change everything. His daughter, Bailey, had just been born. The world stopped for a second. For the first time, Jelly Roll wasn't just thinking about himself. He wasn't just another young man behind bars. He was a father. A life existed outside those walls that carried his name, his blood, and his future. The weight of that realization hit him like nothing else ever had. That moment planted the seed of change deep inside him. From there, something began to shift. It wasn't instant. Real change never is. But for the first time, he started to think seriously about what kind of man he wanted to be when he walked out of prison. He didn't want his daughter to grow up seeing him as just another lost soul. Jelly Roll was transferred to the education unit in prison. Instead of wasting time, he decided to do something with it. He worked to earn his GED. A small piece of paper to some, but for him, it was a symbol of taking back control. It was proof that he could do something different. When he walked out of prison in 2009, the world hadn't changed, but he had. He carried not just freedom, but a new sense of purpose. He wasn't going to let the streets define him anymore. He was going to define himself. Redemption is never smooth. It's built through cracks, pain, and persistence. For Jelly Roll, the years after his release became a battle to build something better, not just for himself, but for his daughter and the people who still believed in him. As his music grew louder, so did his past. His criminal record made it nearly impossible to travel internationally. To perform outside the U.S., he had to go through endless legal hurdles, stacks of paperwork, and entire teams of lawyers. But he never stopped pushing. He wasn't going to let his past lock him down forever. Then came a turning point once again. The Tennessee Board of Parole reviewed his case. They looked at the man he used to be and the man he had become. After a long hearing, they voted to recommend a pardon. It was then sent to the governor for final approval. It wasn't just a legal process, it was a symbolic moment of recognition. A statement that said, people can change. Throughout these years, Jelly Roll used music as his weapon and his healing tool. He turned his pain into lyrics. He turned his guilt into hope. His songs weren't just catchy, they were stories. Real, raw, and unfiltered stories that connected with people who were fighting their own battles. He also began speaking to prisoners and young people in detention centers, telling them what no textbook could teach, that it's never too late to rewrite your story. That one mistake, or even many, doesn't have to define your ending. Step by step, Jelly Roll rose, not like a rocket, but like a man climbing out of a deep pit with his bare hands. Today, Jelly Roll isn't just a singer or a performer. He is a symbol of second chances. His story echoes through the lives of people who have been told they'll never make it. When he sings, it's not just music, it's a testimony. A reminder that pain can be fuel, and failure isn't the end unless you choose it to be. He still carries his past with him. He doesn't hide it. He talks about it openly. The addiction, the jail cells, the mistakes. But he carries it differently now. Not as chains, but as proof of how far he has come. His songs fill stadiums, his voice touches hearts, and his presence gives hope to people who need it most. Jelly Roll has become a lighthouse for the lost. Not because he had a perfect life, but because he didn't. Because he fell, broke, and rebuilt. Every step he takes is a step that tells the world change is real. Second chances exist. And no matter how dark the night is, the sun can still rise. There are stories that shake the world, stories that prove no matter how deep the darkness is, the light can still find its way in. One such story belongs to a man who walked through pain, chaos, and broken dreams, and turned them into something powerful. This is the story of Jelly Roll. Once trapped in a cycle of mistakes and addiction, today he stands as a voice of hope for millions. Jelly Roll's journey isn't just about fame. It's about redemption. It's about someone who fell hard but got back up harder. His life reminds us that even the most shattered souls can rebuild themselves brick by brick. What makes this story truly unforgettable is that his pain didn't break him. It shaped him. Today, his songs touch hearts, heal wounds, and give strength to people who once felt invisible. But behind every powerful lyric is a man who lived every word. He didn't just write about pain, he bled it, survived it, and turned it into music that saves lives. Before the lights, before the sold-out shows, before millions screamed his name, there was just a boy in Tennessee, lost, angry, and searching for a way out. What happened between that lost boy and the man on stage is not just a rise to fame. It's a resurrection. This isn't just a success story. It's proof that second chances are real, that redemption is possible, and that even when the world writes you off, your story isn't over. It's only just beginning. Every great story starts somewhere. And for Jelly Roll, it began in the heart of Tennessee. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, he grew up surrounded by both love and hardship. His family wasn't rich, but they were real. The kind of people who believed in tough love, hard work, and surviving whatever came their way. As a child, Jelly Roll was full of energy, humor, and curiosity. But beneath that playful surface, he carried a quiet storm. He saw things at a young age that most kids shouldn't have to. Life around him was raw, sometimes warm, sometimes brutal. It was the kind of environment that could either make or break a person. For Jelly Roll, it did both. Music came to him early. It wasn't fancy music lessons or shiny stages. It was hip-hop beats on the radio, gospel songs at church, and Southern stories told on porches at night. He soaked in every rhythm, every word, every emotion. Music became his language when words failed him. It was his escape, his shield, and his fire. But the streets also spoke to him, and their voice was loud. Like many young men around him, he got pulled into trouble, not because he was evil, but because that was the world he knew. Skipping school turned into hanging out with the wrong crowd. Hanging out with the wrong crowd turned into hustling. Hustling turned into surviving in a world that didn't offer too many choices. By his teenage years, Jelly Roll was already walking a dangerous path. In and out of trouble, he felt the weight of choices that didn't seem like choices at all. The world had painted a future for him, one filled with prison walls, not stages. But even in those darkest corners, music never left him. It stayed like a stubborn flame refusing to die out. In his mind, he dreamed of stages he'd never seen. He imagined crowds that didn't yet exist. And even though no one around him believed it, deep down, a small part of him knew he was made for more. What made Jelly Roll's early years unique was how raw they were. There was no fairy tale, no lucky break, just a boy trying to survive in a world that didn't make it easy for him to dream. But it's in those broken places that the strongest stories are born. He learned pain early, but he also learned strength early. And those lessons would one day become the heartbeat of his music. The thing about life is, it doesn't care if you're ready or not. When it hits hard. And for Jelly Roll, it came like a storm with no warning. His teenage years bled into early adulthood with a string of bad decisions, wrong turns, and broken promises. By his early 20s, he found himself deep in the world of drugs, both selling and using. What started as a way to survive turned into chains that held him down. The boy who once dreamed of stages now found himself behind bars. Prison isn't just a place. It's a feeling. It's waking up every day knowing your freedom is gone, your dreams are buried, and the world outside is moving without you. For Jelly Roll, it was a wake-up call, but not an instant one. At first, he felt numb, lost, angry at the world. Angry at himself, his family suffered. His dreams crumbled. And the future he once imagined seemed impossible now. But here's the thing. Pain doesn't just destroy. Sometimes it awakens something inside. And in that cold, locked cell, Jelly Roll started to think. Really think. He began writing lyrics, not to be famous, but to survive. His pain became ink on paper. His regrets turned into rhymes. He started shaping the very thing that would one day set him free. His voice. But the road wasn't easy. Even after getting out, life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. The world doesn't hand out second chances easily. He faced judgment, rejection, and the crushing weight of his own past. There were moments he could have given up, and no one would have blamed him if he did. But Jelly Roll wasn't done yet. Somewhere in that darkness, he made a decision. He decided his past would not be the end of his story. It would be the fuel that carried him forward. Every redemption story has a moment, a spark that changes everything. For Jelly Roll, that moment wasn't loud or glamorous. It was quiet. It was personal. It was the day he decided he was tired of being his own worst enemy. It didn't happen overnight. It started with small steps, choosing music over the streets, choosing growth over pain, choosing to believe, even if no one else did. He began to put his soul into his songs, performing wherever he could, slowly building a name for himself. His songs weren't polished pop hits. They were raw, real, and brutally honest. People connected to that because they felt it. He wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was telling his truth. And truth has power. As his music reached more people, he started seeing something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. People who once walked the same dark paths told him how his words saved them, how his pain became their strength. That's when he realized this was bigger than him. The world didn't just need another singer. It needed someone real. Someone who could look brokenness in the eye and still sing. Jelly Roll became that person. And that moment, that shift from self-destruction to self-belief, was the foundation of everything that came after. Success isn't a straight road. It's full of bumps, twists, and moments where you question everything. Jelly Roll's rise was no different. After years of being overlooked, judged, and doubted, he started climbing. Slowly, but surely. He released songs that spoke to people who felt unheard. His words weren't fancy, but they were real. That's why they worked. His fan base didn't come from mainstream media at first. It came from the streets, from the people who knew what it meant to fight for your life. Show after show, city after city, The boy who once sat in a cell was now standing on stages with thousands singing his words back to him. Every lyric was a battle won. Every fan was proof that pain can be turned into power. But what truly set Jelly Roll apart was his humility. He never forgot where he came from. He didn't hide his scars, he showed them. And in showing them, he gave others permission to heal, too. The music industry eventually had to pay attention. But by then, Jelly Roll had already built something real, a movement, not just a career. And nothing is stronger than that. Today, Jelly Roll isn't just a musician. He's a symbol of redemption, a living reminder that your past doesn't define your future, that brokenness can be turned into something beautiful. His songs echo through speakers, but more importantly, they echo through hearts. People who once gave up on themselves find a piece of hope in his story, and that's his greatest legacy. He uses his platform not just to sing, but to speak for those who feel voiceless. He talks openly about his past, the mistakes, the pain, the redemption. He doesn't glamorize it. He humanizes it, from a cell to the stage, from pain to purpose, from silence to a voice that moves millions. Jelly Roll proved that no matter how dark the night gets, the sun always rises again. This isn't the end of his story. It's just another chapter. And for every person who ever thought they were too broken to be fixed, Jelly Roll is proof that they're wrong, because sometimes the people who fall the hardest rise the highest. When Jelly Roll stepped fully into the light, something powerful happened. His pain stopped being just his pain. It became a bridge, a connection between him and millions of people who had felt the same darkness. His concerts didn't feel like ordinary shows. They felt like therapy sessions where every song pulled a wound into the light and gently began to heal it. Unlike many artists, he didn't hide behind perfect lyrics or polished images. He stood on stage, tattoos visible, eyes raw, heart wide open. He talked about addiction, jail time, and the weight of regret like a friend sitting next to you on a front porch at night. People didn't just hear him, they felt him. Jelly Roll understood something most people don't, the power of shared pain. He used his own scars to give strength to others, and that's what made him different. While the world expected him to sing and move on, he turned his art into a movement. He made sure no one who felt broken ever felt alone again. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about building a community, one song, one story, one soul at a time. Behind every strong man who rebuilds himself, there's usually something, or someone, who reminds him why life is worth fighting for. For Jelly Roll, that light was love and family. His past relationships had been shaped by chaos, but with time, he learned that love doesn't have to hurt. It can heal. His family became his anchor, his reminder that even the most broken souls can build something beautiful. He often speaks openly about how love taught him responsibility, patience, and forgiveness, especially forgiveness toward himself. His wife stood by him not just in the spotlight, but in the quiet battles no one saw. His children gave him purpose beyond music, beyond stages, beyond fame. For a man who once believed he was too broken to deserve love, finding it and building a life around it became one of his greatest victories. It proved that healing isn't just about surviving the storm. It's also about learning to live in the sunlight after it. As Jelly Roll's career grew, so did his sense of responsibility. He knew his story wasn't meant to end with him standing on a stage. It was meant to ripple outward. That's why he began using his platform to give back. He visited prisons, rehab centers, and shelters, not as a superstar, but as someone who had been there. He looked people in the eye and told them the same thing he once needed to hear. You can still make it out. He funded programs for recovery and mental health. He spoke out about addiction, poverty, and second chances, not because it looked good in headlines, but because he understood. He'd lived that pain. Giving back wasn't charity to him. It was a promise that he would never forget where he came from. And in doing so, he turned his success into something far greater than himself. Success isn't the end of struggle. Sometimes it's the beginning of new ones. For Jelly Roll, fame brought a spotlight he wasn't used to. Every word, every move, every choice was suddenly being watched. There were moments of doubt, overwhelming pressure, and old fears creeping back. But this time, he wasn't the same man he once was. He had learned how to fight, not just for survival, but for peace. Instead of letting the pressure consume him, he embraced growth. He surrounded himself with people who kept him grounded. He focused on making music that stayed true to his roots, no matter how big the stage got. He stayed real, because that's what saved him in the first place. These battles were different now. They weren't about escaping darkness. They were about protecting the light he had built. Every story that starts in pain can end in power, and Jelly Roll is living proof. His legacy isn't just about songs or awards. It's about impact. It's about the kid in a small town who hears his lyrics and decides to keep fighting. It's about the mother in recovery who listens to his story and believes she can start over. His name stands for more than a career. It stands for hope, for second chances, for every soul that was written off but chose to rise again. Long after the lights dim and the crowd goes home, his words will remain, carved into hearts, whispered in late-night drives, sung by people who needed them most. That's the kind of legacy money can't buy. From a boy lost in the streets of Tennessee to a man who gives hope to millions. This is Jelly Roll's story. Not of perfection, but of persistence. Not of glamour, but of grit. And maybe, just maybe, his journey will remind the world of a simple truth. No matter how far you fall, you can rise again.